Atlanta. So I've been doing a series on playoff history from 99, 2000 through until now. And I was going to do one on Winnipeg. And don't worry, I will. But you get into that same argument of, well, Atlanta and Winnipeg are different. And yet the Atlanta Thrashers moved to Winnipeg, so that history is part of the Winnipeg Jets. So I thought, I want to talk about both Atlanta teams. So Atlanta Flames and Atlanta Thrashers. And I don't care what anybody says. This is still a sharp jersey. And I know there's a lot of people that didn't like it when it came out. And they're like, what's that monstrosity? But I remember looking at it and thinking, well, it's different. Something different. They didn't do like a standard copy and paste of everybody else's jersey. So the interesting thing with Atlanta is that every now and then I'll get the question in a live stream of, do you think Atlanta gets another team? And I immediately say no. And I still immediately will say no. Because the NHL's tried twice. I don't think they would risk going back to the same city a third time and it not working out for a third time. The interesting thing is that the reason that it failed the second time, not the same as the reasons it failed the first time, although history will remember it that they're pretty much the same. So in 72-73, when they came in, it was really about countering the WHA. The World Hockey Association, which I did a video series on last offseason, really was trying to break into markets that the NHL wasn't in. And the NHL said, all right, so we're going to break into all those markets too. One thing that will shock the NHL into doing something is the idea that somebody else might make money off something first. One of the reasons why I think they went to Vegas was they realized, hey, whoever gets into Vegas first makes a ton of money. Let's go to Vegas. So the move to Atlanta, much like the move to Nassau over in New York, was about we are trying to keep the WHA out of these markets. We are trying to put the WHA out of business, the same as we did Eddie Livingstone. So for $6 million, you get the Atlanta Flames. And the Atlanta Flames were a decent team, but they didn't really inspire. They made the playoffs, sure. Did they win in the playoffs? No. So we're going to look at this, and I'm going to look at this from an attendance perspective, okay? Because attendance is what people are always going to talk about. And it's an interesting topic, but it's not the biggest problem that Atlanta's had in general over both organizations' time. They started out with an attendance of 12,516 at the Omni. That went up the season after that to 14,162, and that's with Cliff Fletcher as GM. So Cliff Fletcher, Hall of Fame member, the only Hall of Fame member who spent time in the Atlanta Flames organization. 74-75, Eric Vale wins the Calder as a member of the Atlanta Flames. 13,444 attendance, so it's down. And then it starts to drop again, 11,963 in 75-76. Relocation talk starts in 76. They've been in the league 4 years, and already so we may have to relocate. This is not that unusual in the 70s. Kansas City, Cleveland, Oakland. There's a lot of movement going on, and there's not a lot of patience with any of this either. And so the idea that maybe it's not working in the Omni, it's not working in Atlanta, right? Willie Plett, 76-77, wins the Calder. The team, their attendance goes up a little bit, 12,259 on average. But that bump, it won't last. And the following season, 77-78, they dropped to 10,501 average per game. That is not good enough. The following season, where Bob McMillan wins the Lady Byng, that's the third and final award winner for the Atlanta Flames, 11,441. It's just not enough. So 79-80, their final season, they end up at 10,024, and they're so desperate to try to get fans into attendance that after the Miracle on Ice, Jim Craig being a big star now, they signed Jim Craig to come in and play goal for them to try to garner some interest with the team locally, and it just doesn't work. They end up with 10,024 fans on average. They finished with a record of 268 wins, 260 losses, 108 ties. And then they're moved off to Calgary. Calgary keeps the name Flames, which of course was the name that Atlanta took for when the city was burnt down. And in the playoffs, their overall record ends up being 2-15. They never won a round. The entire time that they were in Atlanta, never won a round. And then they went to Calgary, and of course they experienced some success. and they won themselves the Stanley Cup in 1989. So it was 9 years after the move from Atlanta that the Calgary Flames get to where Atlanta never could. In fact, winning around, the Calgary Flames did it pretty darn quickly after arriving in Calgary. As I remember, in 1981, they went on a little bit of a run. So the year after they leave Atlanta, they went on a run. If they had gone on that run in Atlanta, might have garnered more interest locally, and you might have been able to make that non-traditional market work. And it's that argument that I've made when it comes to the way things are being done with Vegas and with Seattle. The NHL looks back at expansion teams and says, okay, what kind of mistakes have we made in the past? So they make a bigger mistake in 1999 with the Atlanta Thrashers. The bigger mistake being that this is one of many teams that have come in over a short period of time. So you have San Jose come in, then you have Ottawa and Tampa come in. And already when Ottawa and Tampa came in, there was talk about how the talent base was really diluted around the league. Then you bring in Florida and Anaheim after that. You bring in Nashville. Now you're bringing in Atlanta within a decade. So just imagine if the NHL came out tomorrow and said, so we're going to increase our teams by, we're thinking 9 more teams over the next decade. We would all be rightfully losing our minds at just how much that's going to, just destroy teams' talent bases, right? Almost every team in the leagues can be looking at losing 9 players. Some of them may not be great players, but some of them may be, right? So the expansion draft is awful that year. Now, Nashville's exempt. Nashville was the last team that had come into the expansion draft. They were exempt. Nobody made a big stink about it because Nashville wasn't very good either. So it's not like Nashville's player that they would have been protecting from Atlanta by not having to be an expansion draft would have made a huge difference for Atlanta. But other teams were allowed to protect 9 forwards, 5 defensemen, and 1 goaltender. And again, you have the first and second year players exempt. That exempts a lot of players. Right now, as I'm recording this, we've got a lot of teams that are concerned about what they might lose to Seattle. Under those expansion rules, they wouldn't have to worry. Not only that, but if they want to protect 2 goaltenders, they could, and then they'd protect 7 forwards and 3 defensemen. So, yeah, these expansion rules, and again, remember, these are teams that have already been picked over numerous times. So what you're losing to Atlanta, probably not a major part of the team. So Atlanta's getting not very good results for throwing in an expansion fee that is much higher than the $6 million the Atlanta Flames put in. The Atlanta Flames had a half-decent team out of the gate because Cliff Fletcher's a good GM. Don Waddell was the GM in Atlanta. He had a really rough time there, and now in Carolina, he's doing well. So I'm wondering now how much of what was wrong was because of Atlanta reasons rather than Don Waddell reasons. Now, the other thing, too, with this expansion draft was if your team lost a goaltender in the 98 expansion draft to Nashville, you couldn't lose a goaltender in 99. Yeah. So just imagine how many teams were calling those guys that lost goaltenders and saying, so we may lose a goalie here. Although, you know what? Never mind. We can protect 2. We have 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, 2 goaltenders. Yeah, no, never mind. So, yeah, Atlanta's coming in low. But their attendance that first year, 17,206. You've got big money. You got big attendance. And honestly, that first year was a huge rousing success, despite the fact that the team on the ice wasn't very good. And despite the fact that the Atlanta Thrashers will not spend a lot of money. That's part of the reason why fans eventually kind of tune out. So their second year, 15,262 as the excitement wanes right away. Third year, 13,668, even though Danny Heatley wins the Calder that year. 2002-2003, the attendance averages out to 13,476. So it's down. It's absolutely down. It's not at the bottom of the league. One thing about Atlanta that's important to remember with the Thrashers, they were never at the bottom of the league. But while they were never at the bottom of the league, they were never near the top either. So 2003-2004, the last year before the lockout, 15,121. So the attendance had come back up again. Ilya Kovalchuk wins the Rocket Richard Award that year. And we're already into this issue where you've got Kovalchuk, you've got Heatley, you've got some good young players there, right? Now, eventually, Heatley would be traded out. You'd end up with Hossa. You still have a really good young team here, but you're not surrounding them with the right players to make the playoffs. The team is well, they're treading water. They didn't have a winning season until the year after the expansion, or after expansion, the year after the wiped out season of 04-05. In 2005-2006, they finished 41-33-8. Their attendance 15,550. People will come out when you have a team that's playing relatively well, especially in a non-traditional market. So you're trying to sell the sport in a market that it hasn't been in before, or in this case, it hasn't been successful in before. You've got to kind of give the fans something to make them want to go out and spend money on tickets. Now, 06-07, they won the division that year. They had 16,240 fans on average. It was their peak. 21st overall in attendance. That still puts them ahead of 9 other teams. And then they lost in the first round against the Rangers in 4. They went out, they got some rentals at the deadline. They were really trying to load up. I think Atlanta understood how important it was to win and how important it was to go on some kind of a run in the playoffs. So they loaded up to try to make it happen, and it failed. And then the next season, what also hurts the team is the housing market crash takes place during the 07-08 season. So attendance drops a bit, 15,831. But with housing crashes going on, that means people don't have as much money to spend on tickets. And or if you're losing money and you don't have the kind of attendance, or you don't have the kind of money that you normally would, the first thing you're going to cut is frivolous spending. And obviously, having tickets for sporting events would be one of the first things to go, right? 2008, 2009, they continue to lose attendance. But now the other problem is they're down to 14,626. The Thrashers don't spend money, right? So we're looking at a team that's always at the bottom of the spending for their salaries, and so fans realize, hey, they're not going to spend the money to keep these players, and they're staying away. The team is losing money as well because it's not being run particularly well at all off the ice. 2009, 2010, they did finish above 500 with a 35, 34, and 13 record. 13,607 was their average attendance. But again, we are hearing rumors of Atlanta losing a lot of money, and how long is the NHL going to be able to take to make this work? Their final year, 13,469 is their average attendance. That's right down just below the 13,476 they had in 02-03. It's not good enough, but again, they're not at the very bottom of the league in attendance. NHL doesn't move them due to attendance. But they lost $130 million in their final 6 years. They had been trying to sell the team. They had agreements to sell the team, but Steve Belkin was blocking it. So there's 7 guys owning the team. Steve Belkin, based out of Boston, was blocking the sale. Now, what's interesting is when there was talk of Winnipeg buying the team and True North buying it and taking it to Winnipeg, there was rumors at the time that maybe Belkin was going to ride in on a white horse and save it by refusing to allow the sale to go through, which absolutely was not the case. The lawsuit that he'd been in with the other owners because they'd been trying to sell and he wouldn't allow it was finally being resolved. It just, those two things happened to coincide. So Belkin's lawsuit, the Thrashers figure, hurt them by about $50 million in team value. And just the team wasn't run well. And then they didn't have an agreement to stay in the building. So then there was, all right, where are we going to play? Crap. We don't have a building. And then the NHL had to come in and say, okay, we're going to move this to Winnipeg. So Hall of Famers that played for the Thrashers, you got Marian Hossa, Chris Chelios, Mark Recchi. Those are 3 Hall of Famers that played for the Thrashers. No Hall of Famers who played for the Atlanta Flames. Even though the Atlanta Flames were a better team on the ice, more bigger names came through the Atlanta Thrashers in their time. And again, the Atlanta Spirit Group that owned the team, there was definitely some issues there with their ability to turn that around. And so I feel bad for fans in Atlanta. There are hockey fans. There are legit hockey fans in Atlanta. As of, for instance, Mark Savard, who left because he wanted money, so Atlanta was like, no thanks. He ends up in Boston, and when he came back to Atlanta, he was cheered. They loved him. So, I mean, they knew who the players were. They knew who their guys were. And, it is one of those things that you would think if they'd had competent ownership and a vision. And it's one of those things in the NHL that's interesting. where your team isn't getting the kind of attendance you want, right? So as an owner, your thought's going to be, okay, we're not getting the kind of gate revenues we want. I'm going to cut the budget right now because we need to save some money to make up for that shortfall. But when you cut the budget, when you're not willing to spend money, and fans go, well, they're nickeling and diming all their players. They're not willing to spend money. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to go to games because they clearly don't want to win. You make the problem worse. So this is the issue that an owner has to look at. You have to balance your budget with what the market wants. So you may have to spend more money, risk losing more money, sure, but you may make more money as well. If Atlanta had been willing to hold on to guys, if they had been willing to really make a concerted effort to put a team around Ilya Kovalchuk that worked, if that Kovalchuk trade hadn't been a complete and total unmitigated disaster, then who knows, right? But disastrous trades, there were tons for the Thrashers. There were a few for the Atlanta Flames as well. And that's why it's so interesting that Don Waddell's been so successful with Carolina, because his time in Atlanta, there were so many trades that were just poor. And you have to wonder now how many of those that were poor were because he was told, make sure you trade this guy out and don't bring any money in. We can't afford to spend more money. So when he's gone, we want nothing coming back. Nothing, get futures, get draft picks, get prospects. We can't afford to spend money. That may very well have been part of the problem. And you're definitely handcuffing your general manager when you do that. So it is a shame that the Atlanta Thrashers time was so short, in part because it was fun to have the team there. And the interesting thing too is that they went with Thrashers the second time around, which was actually the runner-up when they were trying to name the team in 72, and they come up with Flames. So there was definitely some synergy between those two franchises. Unfortunately, that amount of synergy meant they didn't last in Atlanta in either instance. But there you go. So if you want the Quebec Nordiques to come back, give an expansion team to Atlanta and wait about a decade, and magically it'll happen. But all kidding aside, I again do feel bad because there are people in the Atlanta area, people in Georgia that really enjoyed watching hockey. There are still Georgian-based hockey teams there now, but the NHL just couldn't get them decent ownership. I think back in the 70s, probably a lot of that had to do with marketing problems and just the fact they never won a round in the playoffs. And this, again, is why when we look at expansion now and they go, why are they giving them a good team out of the gate? Because of this. Because there have been franchises that have failed, and it starts with the expansion draft. The 72 expansion draft for the Islanders and the Flames, not a great one either, because you had 6 teams come in 67, and then you had a couple of teams come in 1970. So what they were picking from was kind of leftovers. And then Washington comes in with Kansas City, and they get nothing. They basically get nothing. So the NHL looks back at its history and says, we have to make sure when a new team's coming in, we're not cutting them off at the knees before they've hit the ice. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.